Hey, this video is going to be for a guy named John. John, this video is for you. I've been thinking a lot about what our discussions have been about. I wouldn't say it's much of more of a debate. It's not. It sounds like a debate, but it's not really a debate. Just know that from the bottom of all of this, I really do want to understand how you were able to come to the conclusion that such things as objective morality exists. So what I will try to do in this video is try to outline the things that how I come to an objective claim as to why morality is subjective and not objective. So hopefully you'll bear with me through this. I know that my arguments to you has sounded a lot like it's straw manning or there's some logical inconsistencies, whatever you want to call it. Hopefully, by the end of this video, through my paint explanation, I know we're going to use MS Paint, sorry. Hopefully, by the end of this, you'll come to understanding of how I operate on a principle basis rather than using my feelings, even though feelings are what makes me choose certain values. I've thought a lot about what you said. You did say a lot of things that are kind of mean and nasty, but I digress from that. That's not important. What's important at the end of the day is how I come to my principles and how I operate in the world. And using feelings by themselves is it's a hard thing to dispute. So let's start into this. So here's the MS Paint. I'm gonna have to extend it out a little bit here. Okay, so I'm gonna use a mouse, and then hopefully through these paintbrushes, let's use paintbrush. Yeah, let's use paintbrush. So so much about philosophy is studying about, in my opinion, two things, right? It studies the nature and existence of things, and the second thing is what knowing the existence of things, what claims can we make? What objective claims can we make that is fundamentally true? So, and that branches out into two things. So, for what we're discussing is normative ethics, and the other one is meta ethic. So, meta ethic is something that helps us understand things on a more. Let me see if I can type out meta ethics. So, meta ethics, to my understanding, is allowing us to come to a objective conclusion about what is right and what is wrong. So oftentimes there are lots of branches of philosophy that deals with meta ethics by analyzing sentence structures or paragraph structures and premises and proposition and come to a logical conclusion about things. And that's kind of hard to do because it's not hard to do to logistically um, to figure out things from a premise and a logical statement. So we use a branch called metaethics. The issue that I have with metaethics is its inability to help us philosophically come to conclusions such as objective morality. And I'll go into why I think that is in a second. So most people don't even operate from a meta-ethical standpoint, even though it's extremely helpful for coming to a logical conclusion about things like objective morality or subjective morality. So we'll go away from metaethics for my discussion because it's difficult to, like I said, come to an objective morality standpoint. So the branch I tend to typically deal with is a branch of ethics called normative ethics. And I might butcher the definition of this, but to my understanding, normative ethics is we generate a bunch of objective claims based on a foundation. So whatever the foundation is, whether it is I'll use the most popular one, the most popular one being well-being. So we'll talk about that. I don't know who was the guy who came up with well-being as its foundation, but we'll call it well-being as a foundation. Okay, and these are values that lots of people choose around the world. Um, they just choose this value because it's vague enough to come to a grounding of an understanding. And what normative ethic does is, well, if well-being is our primacy, if it is the grounding for our principles, then we can make objective claims about what can be uh, what can further perpetuate well-being for every individual, no matter who it is. So I'm making an objective claim. So with well-being, that the value of um, freedom. So I'll say freedom is right and slavery is wrong. Okay? I can objectively make this claim because if I use the grounding that well-being is my foundation, then I can measure the effects of well-being objectively. I can say that, hey, you know what? People who have freedom generally have, or not even generally, will have more well-being than someone who has slavery. Now you might ask yourself, or you might ask me, what is well-being? Well, well-being is the overall health of an individual in the long term, and you can also include things like pleasure in them as well. So, is the short-term pleasures greater than or equal to something like having no consent for people? Or sorry, is the short-term benefits for slavery greater than or equal to uh, or less than the overall well-being of all those people who are enslaved? I can objectively say that freedom is objectively better when we talk about things like slavery. Okay, so that's the branch that I dwell in. Metaethics, I think this is kind of what your field is. However, I have a hard time figuring out where uh, where morals come from your standpoint. So how I view morals. So let me delete this. So this is a moral, right? So freedom is right, slavery is wrong. That's right. These are inherently what morals are. So let me rewrite that. Okay. So these are morals. Okay, or code of conduct. Okay, and these are the things that we come up with to consider to be right or wrong. Um, but it all stems ultimately from well-being. Okay, it all stems from well-being, and so my issue is, well, let's talk about principles, right? So what are principles, right? So you may have heard the principle like um, the golden rule: do unto others as you would yourself, right? So that's kind of like a paraphrasing, phrasing of principles. Principles actually give rise to morals as well, right? So you can actually bring about morals from statements like "do unto others as you would yourself" as a principle, right? So these are principles. And so when you have principles, you can actually have morals from here as well, right? But ultimately, do unto yourself as you would others is a principle derived from well-being. Like why say the golden rule when such things such as well-being doesn't exist, right? Like the whole point why we say the golden rule is that we want other people to be nice to us, so we should on to we should be nice to other people in return for some sort of well-being attached to it, right? So what I'm trying to understand is, well, in order for something to be objective, right, these morals, such as slavery is right, or slavery is wrong, freedom is right, have to transcend other normative ethics, right? And well-being is something we just chose, right? So let me just delete all this, okay? So for other normative ethics, someone might choose something like, um, and I have to go to the opposite polarity on this. What if there was a system where it was pain rather than well-being, right? Like, why is it not pain but well-being? So when we have these systems of normative ethics, right, and you say things like, from our earlier example, freedom is right and slavery is wrong, then that don't these claims no longer become an objective claim, because if pain is the foundation of this moral system, or this system, right, this value, these are values, then this is objectively wrong, right? So what I'm trying to understand is, how is it that you're able to make how is it that you know that this moral, well, say murder is wrong, right? How is it that you know that these morals are wrong when we don't even know the foundation? We don't even know what this foundation could be, right? So this foundation, which gives rise to this, right? Let's say pain was the foundation and murder is wrong, right? How this is not an this is no longer an objective moral anymore, right? So that's my issue, right? The reason why I think morals are subjective is it depends on the value which people subscribe to, right? So if the value is well-being or pleasure, well, we'll say not pleasure. If it is just well-being, right, how can we can then say that this moral is objectively correct, right? We can say that these are objectively correct even though they're crossed out for other ones. So the grounding here is where I fundamentally disagree with. Like, in order for something to be objectively correct, mores or code of conducts such as this will always be right no matter which grounding it's on, right? So when I'm asking you, John, and hopefully you can answer this, is what is the objective morality which fits all, because if it's objective morality, which fits all of the groundings, right? Where does it lie? Like, what are these morals? And then I believe you said something like, well, respect your elders, or what is another one? Love everyone conditionally, right? So when you say things like this, it's hard for me to place exactly, well, where is it all, you know? How come does this go with this? I mean, it doesn't, right? And because of that, it can't transcend different normative ethics, right? It can't do it, because this is objectively false for pain, but here it is objectively right for well-being. So if something is objective, right, it doesn't matter what the grounding is, right? It should always be true no matter what. So now you might say, oh, I don't believe that pain is actually the grounding for anything. I don't believe that we subscribe to pain. And then, well, then my opinion is, why did you pick well-being, right? Why did you, John, pick well-being in the beginning? Well, my answer to that is that our feelings are what makes us choose well-being in the beginning. There's nothing objective about it, right? The reason why you choose well-being and the reason why I choose well-being is because I subjectively value well-being, and it just so happens a lot of other people do as well. So if you can answer me what objective morality, or how the one that you've posited before, can fit into any system no matter what, then please, I would love to hear it. But I mean, if you can't tell me what evidence it is, then you have to understand that you do have the burden of proof when you make claims like objective morality exists. And I don't know if you've ever looked up into the burden of proof, but look into something called Russell's teapot, okay? And I won't go into what Russell's teapot. I'll probably paraphrase it, okay? So Russell's teapot basically states that there is a teapot floating around in space, right? No one can observe it, and no one can see it, right? So therefore, Russell's teapot exists. Now, this is a proposition, right? So it's a weird proposition, right? A teapot exists in space, it's rotating around, and no one can ever see it, right? And if you cannot prove me right, or if you cannot prove me wrong, right, then therefore it does exist, right? So this is the Russell's teapot, and a lot of people actually still argue like this, right? Because you cannot prove me wrong, therefore I am right. It's a weird thing because we do have a limited sense in our ability to sense things, right? So the burden of proof has to naturally fall upon someone who's making something called a positive claim, right? So if I make the positive claim that objective morality exists, it is on the burden of proof for you to say because ... Okay, I can say, however, that objective morality doesn't exist. I don't have to say because of anything, because I have a limited ability to perceive everything that there is of the world. So, John, I'm asking you, and I'm curious, because you seem to think this is a debate. This is not a debate. This is for me to understand, because you have way more experience on this than I do. Where does more objective morality come from? And if it does exist, please show me where it exists. And if you cannot show me where it exists, then I still have, I'm still going to hold this ground until you show me proof that it exists. And then I will gladly come over to you and say, hey, you know what? Objective morality exists because John showed me this evidence. But since you haven't shown me any evidence, right, I can't follow you. I can't. So please, if you can just address this argument, or whether anything that I've written to you on this MS Paint is wrong, then please address this, and I would really appreciate it if you just stop, insulting me. Okay. All right, John. Feel special, man.